natural light, natural sound today. Walked out of the house and left my microphones. So had to kind of go with what I got here. And take in a little bit of high school basketball. As you know, the Florida high school basketball season opens this week with some preseason action. You got the boys and girls starting on the same week, which is normally not the case. Normally the girls open a week before the guys do, but I guess they changed that along with a lot of other stuff they've been changing over the years. But come here and check out a little action. And bus running late, so school I come to see, it should be a couple minutes out. I made a phone call. They told me they were a few minutes out, so I got a few minutes to kill. I'm going to try to redo, but I'm going to gamble that I do have a good connection. I talked about some of the trips that some teams are going to have to make for these first round football games. And if you know anything about Florida, normally it's a north-south setup, and it's cut in half where you had 16 districts in the north and 16 districts in the whole state, but the first 8 were cut off for the north, and the other side was the southern division, and then you would generally meet for a championship. But they've been making a lot of changes lately, and none more evident than what you're seeing right now. Neutral sites in Florida used to be for championship games for when you had teams that generally had to travel a long distance. What they were trying to prevent with that idea was a team, say, from Pensacola having to play against a team from Miami, and even worse, Key West. It's 870 miles between Key West and Pensacola by highway, and really that's the only way these teams are going to be able to get there. So you're looking at a very long time on the road. So therefore, it makes sense to play neutral site games. Well, they've been going a little haywire lately, and they keep shaking up the way that they do things, and it leads to changes to what you have now. Take, for instance, long ago when I was in school, the only way you got to the state playoffs was if you won your district. And if you were to make a long trip, generally it's going to be somewhere between Daytona and Pensacola, and the southern end would be anywhere from around Daytona down to Miami area. But generally, Miami teams, they didn't have to play anybody outside the city until they got to the semifinals. So generally, that travel was going to be anywhere from maybe 120 miles at the most. But that's not the case now. Right now, they have seedings. And I've seen seedings in a lot of different places, a lot of different states. Louisiana, for instance, well, I've seen teams from Shreveport take on somebody from New Orleans in the first round, and then they end up playing somebody within the general area for the championship. I see it in Georgia, where they have region champions, where we have 4 teams for each region make the playoffs, and they all go in different directions. Well, if you end up playing somebody from your own region for a championship, then great. You played your way to that. But generally, in Florida, that's not the way it's been over the last few years. Before they made the recent changes to the suburban and rural regions the last 2 years, they would generally have the district champion playing his runner-up in the second round of the playoffs. And I never thought that was right, because if I'm a district champion, the last team I want to see is the team that I see in my district every year. So now you have a situation where 1A schools, I'm going to talk about 1A, they have them seeded 1 through 16 in the rural division. And there are a couple of teams who are going to have to make some long distance trips. But just to give you an idea of what kind of trips I'm talking about, let's talk in general here. There are 2 teams from Jacksonville. They're going to have to take a trip over to Pensacola on Friday, and that's a 360-mile trip. There's team Moorhaven. They got to go up to Madison County, looking at about 300 miles there. Panama City is coming to Jacksonville. Gonzales Tate is coming all the way down to St. Augustine. So it's a lot of teams making some trips. But by far, the longest trip that has to be taken is by Chipley. And Chipley is about 60, 70 miles outside, well, let's just say 100 miles outside Pensacola. And they got to take a trip down to the Palm Beach County area and take on Pahokee. So You're looking at 474 miles for an opening round game in Florida, in a state that came up with neutral site games to prevent such long travel. So if neutral sites are to prevent such long travel, why do you have it seated so now where these teams have to take such long trips? I can see with the 16 seeds, if you cut it in half and have 8 seeds in the north and 8 in the south, then you can reduce travel that way. But the way they have it now, Chipley has got a very, very, very long ride to get down there to play for Hokie. And by the time they get there, they're probably not going to be in the shape to play any games. But that's the way the state has it set up now. But the way it normally works is like I mentioned about Shreveport. I've seen teams from Shreveport end up playing New Orleans in the first round, and then they play some local team for the championship at a neutral site. Well, the first time I seen a championship game in Florida, this happened to be 1980, there was a team from the Pensacola area, Gonzales State, who I mentioned earlier was going to be playing Nice, right outside of St. Augustine. They played Miami Columbus on a Saturday afternoon. I had one of those old radios with a little small TV screen on it. That's how I was able to see that game. But that was way back in 1980. And you're looking at, that's a good 700-mile trip for Columbus to go all the way up there to Pensacola. The state, they didn't want to do that. They didn't want their teams having to do that. So at different times before that, you had teams meet somewhere in the middle. They do the same kind of thing in Texas. They'll meet before the game, they'll determine the site, and then they go there and play. That way everybody doesn't have to make that long trip. But Florida, they decided they want to be like everybody else and let's seed it. Even though that we have the oddball shape that we have in Florida, which makes it kind of difficult to get reasonable travel trips in the earlier rounds if you're going to do seedings. So here you are, you got Chipley having to go all the way down to Hokie, 474 miles for a first round game. And what's generally going to happen is maybe Hokie may get by this game in another one, but they're not going much farther than that. And generally what's probably going to happen, Hawthorne is probably going to end up in the championship game again, playing against somebody that's local. Maybe Williston or Chipley. Not Chipley, but Williston or Chiefland in that championship round. Just like what you had last year when you had Daytona Beach, Mainland, all the way to Tallahassee, bypassing St. Augustine, the team that they played, was only 50 miles away, just to go play for the championship. They could have met in Bunnell or Flagler Farm Coast and played for the championship there. Why did they have to go all the way to Tallahassee for that? So I think in the age of trying to be like everybody else and streamline, you're kind of making it worse. Because if you don't know, coaches in Florida, they don't make any money. And when they make the playoffs, they don't get any extra money for that. So all that's on the house. And who really gains from this? The association gains because they get money off the top from these gates. And they could care less because they're going to get paid no matter who wins or not. And it's not fair to the schools and the coaches and definitely the players. But they're the ones who really get washed in the sauce in this case because nobody don't seem to care much about the how the kids, what kind of shape they're going to be in, especially after they're supposed to be going to school on Friday. I guess education don't mean much anymore, but that's just the way they got it set up now. But anyway, I got some comments that I need to make about the Jacksonville trips to Pensacola this week. Got some interesting historical nuggets that you might be interested in. But right now I'm waiting on a basketball game, which is supposed to start at 5:30. But in Jacksonville, they have a bus issue. And a lot of times the buses, they can't get buses to get athletes to games on time. And such is the case today. Looks like the team is finally rolling in, but I don't know what time the game is actually going to start. But preseason action tipping off here in Jacksonville, and it's going to be very interesting to see because the team that I'm with, they have made some improvements, and it should be an interesting season, and I'm looking forward to it. So this has been Sports for Real, just trying to get a recap of what I talked about this morning. Couldn't really get my point across because I had a bad signal, which I didn't know about. That caused my screen to be all garbled. So hopefully this came through okay, and I'll try to make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen again. But I keep you posted on the sports side. Until next time, this has been Sports for Real. I'm out.